Great. So we're gonna kind of hand it off. We have 4 great speakers today to talk about electric school buses. Like I said, my name is Matt Fromer. I work with SWEEP on transportation policy here in Colorado and around the Southwest. SWEEP is part of a group of organizations, environmental groups, and public interest groups put together the Go EV City campaign, which is an effort to work with cities, counties, local governments in Colorado to set electric vehicle goals and put some of the policies and programs in place to achieve those goals. And that includes light-duty vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles like trucks and freight, and also transit and school buses. So today we want to talk about school buses, electric school buses in Colorado, and some of the opportunities. So to kick it off, about why do we care about electric school buses? First of all, they reduce pollution. So as of 2020, transportation is now the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions in Colorado, surpassed the electricity sector this year. In addition, the Front Range is a serious non-attainment area for ground level ozone, which is causing respiratory illnesses like asthma. The Denver Aurora neighborhood in particular is ranked 12th in the U.S. for ozone pollution, and I think is ranked 3rd or 4th outside California. We do have a worsening air quality issue. Electric school buses, they have 0 tailpipe emissions, so they're not emitting any of the nitrous oxides, VOCs, other pollutants that are creating ground level ozone. And as of today, there's about a 50% reduction in greenhouse gases from electric school buses as compared to diesel buses. The beautiful thing about electric buses is they're only as clean as the grid they plug into. So as that electricity grid gets cleaner every year, as we transition from fossil fuel generation like coal and natural gas to renewables, the buses also get cleaner from a climate perspective. The image on the right is as far as I know, the largest electric school bus fleet in the U.S., and that's in Twin Rivers School District in California. They have today 25 electric school buses, and they've been running this pilot for the past 3 or 4 years. The fleet includes 12 Lion buses, 8 motive-powered Transtech buses, and 5 Bluebirds. So there's a number of different bus manufacturers out there that have introduced electric buses to the lineup. A few stats about the costs and trends. So in Colorado, 4,000 diesel school buses carry 42% of school kids to school every day. There are cost savings from electric buses. So the average bus, this is from a U.S. PIRG report from last year, the average bus saves about $2,000 per year in fuel costs because electricity is cheaper than diesel. Also saves about $4,400 in maintenance costs. And if you combine those over the lifetime of the bus, we're looking at between $170,000 and $240,000 in lifetime O&M savings. There is a higher upfront cost for the electric bus versus a diesel bus, and that cost is coming down over time slowly with the cost of lithium-ion batteries. You can see that in the blue bar on the right there is the upfront cost of the bus. And there are potential funding sources to help offset some of those costs. In Colorado, we have the AltFuels Colorado grant program. We're a few rounds in now. The next one will open April 1st, and we have Matt Goebel from the RAC to talk about that later in the presentation. We have utility partnerships. We'll talk about that in this presentation. And then we also have innovative leasing options from some of the bus manufacturers like Proterra, where you can pay off the incremental cost of an electric bus over time with some of those fuel cost savings. There are 5 school districts in Colorado that have been awarded AltFuels funding for electric school buses so far. We have Boulder, Denver, Aspen, the Roaring Fork, and West Grand. And then lastly, there is just a projection from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, who's expecting that by 2030, that 84% of new buses will be electric. And they anticipate that the electric bus market will actually accelerate more quickly than even the light-duty vehicle market for passenger vehicles. So with that, we have 4 great speakers today. First is Rick Coffin from the Colorado Department of Health and Environment. He's going to talk a little bit about diesel exhaust emissions from buses and the implications. Second, we have Brad Redmond from the West Fargo Public Schools in North Dakota. They've been running an electric school bus pilot for the past 6 months, so we have some real-world experience he's going to share with us. Third, Chris Michalowski from Mountain Parks Electric, utility up by Granby in Colorado. He's working with a school district out in Kremling, and they applied for AltFuels funding for a new electric school bus. And lastly, Matt Goebel from the Regional Air Quality Council to talk about the AltFuels program and the next application round. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Rick Coffin from CDPHE.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me still?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. And do I have control of the slides, or should I just tell you when to go to the next one?
I have control of the slides. So yeah, if you can just say next
okay,
slide
cool.
when you're ready.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. All right, well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to present. It's great to hear that so many people are on the line. And this is a great program. You know, as you said, lots of great speakers today. So I'm going to present about school bus exhaust, which is primarily diesel exhaust, and some of the health implications for that. Specifically related to children's health. This would be a lot of information kind of condensed in a quick presentation, and my contact information and some additional resources are on the last slide. So if anyone has any questions, you know, feel free to ask, and also feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to learn more, or if you'd like to get in touch with someone from a health program at CDPHE. Because I'm in the air division at CDPHE. So if you could go to the next slide. Okay, so what is diesel exhaust? Diesel exhaust is a complex mixture of thousands of gases and fine particulates, which are particulate matter or soot or dark colored smoke. And this mixture contains more than 40 toxic air contaminants. These contaminants present different types of health concerns because they include many known or suspected cancer-causing substances such as benzene, arsenic, and formaldehyde. And as was already discussed, diesel exhaust also contains other air pollutants such as nitrogen oxides, which are known to be a precursor to ozone, which, as was already discussed, is a concern in the Denver Metro North Front Range area, but it's also becoming a concern in other parts of the state. I'm not sure who's all represented on the line today, what parts of the state you're all from, but the Four Corners area, Grand Junction, and also I know Aspen, they're also concerned, as well as other areas of the state are concerned about ozone. So yes, it is primarily a concern in the more populated areas, but it's becoming an issue in other parts of the state. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is not a comprehensive list of all the contaminants in diesel exhaust. It's just meant to kind of convey everything that, or the, you know, kind of the amount of different contaminants in diesel exhaust. And this is important to understand because exposure to many of these has been linked to respiratory illnesses and cancer. Next slide, please. Okay, so if we're exposed to diesel exhaust, as we breathe, the toxic gases and small particles of the exhaust are drawn into our lungs. These particles are small enough to penetrate deep into our lungs, and they can contribute to a long range of health problems. Exposure to fine particulates is associated with increased frequency of childhood illnesses and can also reduce lung function in children. So children's lungs and respiratory systems are still developing, and they're more susceptible than healthy adults to fine particles, and I'll get to that in the next slide. But some of the immediate health effects associated with exposure to diesel exhaust include irritation of the eyes, nose, throat, lungs. It could cause coughs, headaches, lightheadedness, and nausea. And then long-term known effects, again, diesel exhaust is carcinogenic, so it can lead to cancer and cardiovascular and respiratory diseases. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide explains why children are more susceptible to exposure to air pollutants. One, their lungs are still developing, but two, as you can see in those 3 bullets right there, child respiratory rates are more rapid than adults, so they basically take in more breaths per minute. So if you think, if you're standing next to a bus that's running, an adult and a child, the child is going to have a higher exposure rate. Next slide, please. Okay, and then basically, children also, when we're talking about school buses, they're more likely to be exposed to diesel exhaust emissions because they spend a lot of time in and around the school buses. And we have an estimate here, 20 days per month, 9 months out of the year, up to 10 to 12 years. This could lead to an average of 4,320 exposures. The time of the exposure, may vary depending on if you live in a city and you don't spend too much time on the bus, or if you live in a more rural part of the state, kids might spend a longer amount of time on the bus. And if you go to the next slide. So as was discussed already, one of the great benefits of electric buses is it reduces fuel use and emissions, and the emissions from idling do not occur. And there's been a number of interesting studies over the past couple of decades that look at school diesel emissions from school buses, and including in the bus and outside the bus. And in some cases, the levels of exhaust inside the bus were so high that you would almost think that the buses were designed to have the exhaust piped back into the bus. And then, also they found high levels of exhaust like in vehicles that were trailing the buses in traffic. So that's a concern. And then also a concern is when the buses are idling outside of a school. So I really like this graphic here. I took this, Great Britain has a clean air campaign, and they've used this image over the last couple of years, but it really shows that, it's true what it says. Air pollution affects you from your first breath to your last. And there's other, like in the elderly person on there, there has been a number of studies. You may have seen headlines in the news about how exposure to certain types of air pollution, and there's been a lot of research in this area related to diesel exhaust. It could lead to certain types of neurological conditions. It's also starting to be linked to cognitive function and depression and things of that nature. So, the more electric buses we have on the road and less diesel exhaust, that we're exposed to, you know, it'll be a benefit to all the different types of people listed here and more. So next slide, please. And here are some links. And there's my contact information. I think I'm at time now, but I'd be more than happy to connect anyone who has any questions or would like additional information with some links. That last link, built environment, is more about walking more than, you know, driving, but they include several really good resources related to children's health and environmental exposures. So I added that in there. But yeah, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or again, feel free to give me a call or email me, and I'd be happy to connect you to anyone. And I'll also, if you have any specific health questions, I can connect you with a public health professional epidemiologist, and we can take it from there.
All right. Thank you, Rick. That was really helpful. Any questions that people have, please type them into the chat feature on the GoToWebinar panel to the right of your screen, and then we'll go through those at the end after all the presentations. The next speaker we have is Brad Redmond from West Fargo Public Schools.
Hello, this is Brad here, West Fargo Public Schools. We are the we're the first school district in the state of North Dakota to own a all-electric school bus. This started in the winter of 2018. We started working with one of our utility companies to purchase an all-electric school bus. The reason we started looking at that is that it's become an emerging technology that we feel has some application within our school district. Currently in the state, there are diesel buses, gas, propane. Those are already happening in North Dakota. And we felt this was an opportunity to try something new, to not only lower emissions, but also to save operational costs. When you start looking at the costs associated with running an electric school bus versus diesel, you see significant reductions in costs. The big one is the energy it takes to propel a school bus, electric versus diesel. When you look at the diesel buses, we are seeing somewhere around a 40 to 41 cent per mile on average cost for diesel, and around a 15 cent per mile cost for the electric school bus. And those costs associate based on the temperature outside. This fall, when we started the school bus, we were running around 9 cents a mile for the electric school bus, and that reached a plateau of 19 cents per mile based on the cold weather. There are, you also see those same increased costs with diesel, that you see about the same 9 to 10 cents per mile increase as the weather gets cold versus when it's warm outside. And those costs are associated with running the heaters on the bus and the extra power it takes to, to keep the coolant at a certain temperature. And when we look at the electric school bus, we're getting a 5.5 cent per kilowatt hour of rate, which is the off-peak. So we're trying to, at this point, we're trying to figure out how we can charge the bus more on the off-peak times than the on-peak. And that, the after routes, we're setting times that are more off-peak and isn't drawing on the grid as much as when there's a high consumption in the community. So these are all things that we're learning. The school bus itself, is the first conventional school bus off the assembly line at Bluebird. And it's around the 20th school bus nationwide that was sold by Bluebird. E-Lion has been in the business a few more years than Bluebird has been in the business. The nice thing about the Bluebird is that the maintenance is ran through Cummings. We have service shops all over the nation that Cummings has that can work on the school bus, and if there's issues with it, they can diagnose it and work on it. They cover the warranty and those kind of things on the bus. So we're seeing some really good results on our test. We're doing a long-term test right now, and we're looking at a test of at least 7 years. And the things we're looking at is not just how it performs in the cold weather, but how does it handle the long term of driving in the winter with the road grime, the salts, the different types of ice melt they put on the roadways, and how does that affect the electrical components, the connections, the batteries, those types of things on the bus, and is it going to survive the long term in the North Dakota winters? What we're finding so far is that the bus operates very well in the winter. We do lose range, so what we're finding is that for every 1 hour of time that we're operating the bus with the heaters on, we're losing about 20 miles of range, and which is fine for 75% of our routes, as we don't put that many miles on. So we can go out, do our routes, come back and charge the bus during the day. It's typically taking, in the wintertime, somewhere around 3.5 hours to recharge, and it's fully charged when it leaves for the afternoon route. And when we get back, there's about another 3.5 hour time to recharge. The charging station, we have a level 2 charging station. It's not a fast charge station. Those weren't available when we purchased the bus. They're becoming available now, but they have a significant cost increase that I don't think for us at this point it would be beneficial. But it's something that down the road I think would be, if we start looking at moving buses more frequently and using it on different longer routes, or using it more for all-day use versus running it on routes. Can we go to the next slide? So as you'll see, when you look at Colorado weather versus North Dakota weather, you do see that there is about a 10-degree difference in temperatures. Those do have an impact, as I said, on the overall performance of the school bus's range. We haven't seen any type of situations where the bus doesn't perform as well as the diesel bus from an operational standpoint. It's just the amount of range that you have. The bus seems to heat well enough. The acceleration works very well. The one part where it gets cold that gets a little different is it has a system that recaptures energy while you're braking. If the battery temperatures aren't within a certain range, that doesn't work, and you do lose some range on the really cold days. That hasn't been significant though. Other than that, the bus has been performing very well, and we really appreciate the funding we got from our partners. We got funding from the North Dakota Commerce. We got funding from our Cass County Electric, the Coalition for Secure Energy, and we put in money. So in all, at the end of this trial period, we should break even at least with what a diesel bus would cost. So that's all I have today. Anybody has any questions?
Okay, thank you, Brad. That's really helpful to Oh, I'm getting a little bit of feedback there. Really helpful to hear some real world experience from North Dakota. I know there's some real concerns about operating the electric buses in cold temperatures. In California, they've had electric buses for 4 or 5 years now, but the temperature is significantly colder in Colorado. So it's great to hear from North Dakota and that these electric school buses are working for you. Next, we're going to hear from Chris Michalowski from Mountain Parks Electric up in Granby.
Hello, this is Chris. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
All right, great. Well, thank you. So I'm here to share a utility perspective on partnering with a local school district and helping them procure a electric school bus. At this point, we're actually expecting them to have a purchase order within a week or so. So we don't technically have a bus, but I'm here to share what that experience has been like so far. Next slide, please. Oh, so just a quick background. West Grand School District, it's located in Kremling, Colorado. It's a small rural district. They have, oh, hold on, my computer just turned off. There we go. 440 students. The bus is expected to cover 92 miles per day, morning and afternoon route. As far as Mountain Parks Electric, we serve all of Grand and Jackson counties with portions of Summit Route and Larimer. We have 22,000 meters, and we're a tri-state G&T co-op. Next slide, please. All right, so as a utility, why help our school districts? I think first and foremost, we're the local experts when it comes to EVs and EV transportation. We've already been doing a lot of research on EVs, and some of us may offer special rates or programs or incentives. So really, this is an extension of the work that we're already doing. Diesel exhaust impact on children. We just had some great information on that. Additional kilowatt hour sales. As a co-op, anytime we can sell additional kilowatt hours, it strengthens us as an organization. We want to help promote local EV adoption in general. We think electric school buses, being that they're large, they're on the roads twice a day, they're very visible. We hope parents see those, and when they're in the market to purchase their vehicle, hopefully they choose an electric. And then lastly, to help lower our school's operating expense, just to make their budgets go even further. As a co-op, we always pride ourselves on community support, and anytime we can help our school districts, we consider that a win. The next slide, please. All right, so how much does it cost? So West Grand School District solicited bids from 3 different bus manufacturers. They had Lion Electric, Thomas, and Bluebird, and ultimately they went with Bluebird. They have an existing diesel fleet of Bluebird buses, and great relationship with their dealer. And I think one of the other things that they really like about sticking with the same manufacturer is the fact that minus the powertrain, most of the parts are identical. So for example, if the windshield wiper motor breaks on the electric bus, well, it's the exact same part number and same repair procedure as the diesel. So being that we're rural, we are a few hours away from the Denver metro area. Being able to maintain things with our existing mechanics and shop was really important to them. So you can see that total cost for the bus itself was $388,000. A level 2 charger, 19.2 kW, was $7,000, and a total cost for the bus and infrastructure was $395,000. For comparison, they can purchase a diesel bus for $147,000. So that's an upfront difference of $248,000. Next slide, please. All right, so we really, once we were aware of the AltFuels Colorado Vehicle Grant, that's when we got pretty excited about the opportunity out there. So just to give you a breakdown of how we were able to fund this for our school. So the state grant covered $273,000. Mountain Parks Electric and Tri-State G&T contributed $121,000. Mountain Parks Electric, our portion of the funding came through our education fund. As a co-op, any years that we earn a profit, we actually return that back to our members. And what can happen is people move away and they don't update contact information, or maybe they pass away, or for whatever reason, we're unable to get their refund back to them. And so we hold on to that money for 3 years, and after 3 years, it goes into an education fund. So typically we, fund scholarships and other needs from our school districts. But I would say the last couple years, we have really focused on beneficial electrification projects with our school districts. So if there's any co-ops listening and you don't have an education fund, it might be worth having that discussion with your CFO to see if there's any opportunity. So just to go back to the breakdown, so the total contributions, $395,000, school bus cost, $395,000, and we were able to get this bus at zero cost for our school district. Next slide, please. And even when we proposed that, I would say it was a bit of a tough sell. As utilities, kind of going back to our expertise in EVs, we just assumed the district would be all about it. And I think we failed to realize that they take transporting other people's children extremely seriously. And so a lot of these questions are fairly simple, but, I think it's a good recommendation for utilities looking to partner with school districts to really do your homework. Simple stuff from will it go up hills to, charging times if we're off peak, are we going to have enough? So just kind of doing your homework. It seems at this point, a lot of these buses that are being purchased are a collaboration between utilities and, state funding and districts. So I think, just getting everyone at the table outright and kind of working through all these questions is a really good thing. Next slide, please. So we are going to run it as a pilot. So here's some of the data. We'll be recording kilowatt hour as well as kW usage, daily mileage. Really, the biggest thing I think the biggest question hanging out there is cold weather performance. So we'll have a weather data as well as inside cabin temperature data. The bus will be charged outside of our peak hours, and then we're going to also have a maintenance log and costs associated provided by the school district. Really, we just want this data for ourselves so we can share with the other districts that we serve, as well as our transit districts to plant the seed that electrifying buses in our territory is possible. Next slide, please. All right, and that's it. As a small rural community and a co-op, we really pride ourselves on being able to bring modern technology to the communities we serve, and so it's a really big deal for our school district in our town, and we're excited to finally get the bus here and get it on the road. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That's exciting, and congratulations on receiving the AltFuels Colorado grant funding. Next, we're going to talk to Matt Goebel from Regional Air Quality Council about the AltFuels Colorado program. Which again, the next application round is going to open here on April 1st.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, welcome.
Awesome. Yeah, so thanks, Matt, and everyone else for asking me to participate. So, we can see kind of the head slide here. If you want to click through, Matt, to the next slide, please. So I want to give a very brief background about the settlement funds. Hopefully this is a review for most folks, but we like to start with this so everyone has kind of an idea of what the color of money, where this money came from. So if you're all familiar with the Volkswagen cheating scandal, kind of at a worldwide level, and basically how it affected Colorado, was a $68.7 million total funding allocation that can only be spent on predetermined eligible projects. And basically what the AltFuels program does is has a portion of that $68.7 million, so not the entire pot here, that we can run, application rounds for electric school buses and the like. So something really important is that we do not actually have this money in our account. Today we request this funding as we see applications come in. This funding is managed by a trust in Delaware, kind of per the legal aspect of the trust. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So some history for an AltFuels program. The program had $21.5 million of that funding for projects, and as of last December, we have awarded approximately $9 million. In addition to electric school buses, we will see applications for this funding for heavy-duty freight vehicles. We could see some freight switchers, some medium-duty freight, some electrification of ground support equipment, as well as forklifts. So, I know we're talking particular to school buses today, but I just want to make folks aware that it's, not exclusive to school buses. Another thing to keep in mind is that in addition to the vehicles, there is some eligibility for charging station infrastructure, but those requests must accompany the application for the vehicle itself. And so, we're not able to fund standalone charging infrastructure through the AltFuels program. If you have interest in that for whatever reason, I would direct you to our Charge Ahead Colorado program, which funds standalone charging station projects kind of on a semi-annual, I think maybe 3 times per year, but I would recommend checking out the Clean Air Fleets website, cleanairfleets.org, for information on that program. And another key thing is that every project that is selected or that is, turns in an application has to identify a comparable diesel vehicle to be scrapped in order, to be selected. It's one of several criteria, but there is a scrapping requirement, and that is a hard scrapping requirement. And so there's no way we can get around that, unfortunately. So next slide, please. Awesome. So more particular to school buses here, first and foremost, school buses that anybody who applies to the program, they have to meet all minimum standards set by the Colorado Department of Education for transportation vehicles. So I know we've chatted about a couple of different manufacturers from some of the other presenters and slides today. Unfortunately, some of the buses that are in use in other parts of the country would not qualify to be purchased here in Colorado. So my recommendation is please do your homework, be aware of what would qualify through the State Department of Education. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and I can help you navigate that. School buses moving forward are going to be eligible to receive 117% of the incremental cost. And the incremental cost is basically the difference between the new electric and the new comparable diesel. So Chris had kind of an example on one of his slides, roughly speaking, about how we come to incremental cost, and the application will, prompt you to input some numbers, but, very rough math, you can figure, up to 117% is what we're offering kind of moving forward. We're also requiring that fleets beginning in April provide all of the quotes with their application. So that's something that's a little bit new, but it really helps our review committee kind of understand cost and project allocation, as well as ultimately helps us, when we select awarded projects, move forward in a timely manner. So just kind of be aware of that. We're also going to be requiring some kind of proof of utility engagement moving forward. So beginning in April, if you apply for funding, there'll be a section in the application that basically asks you to, explain to the review committee that you have engaged with your utility, that you have asked, some purposeful questions. And I think going back again to Chris's slides, a lot of those questions are going to be the types of things that the review committee is going to want to see. Please do not answer those questions by just listing who your utility is, because that will not meet the requirements. So, and finally, again, we want to make sure that everybody associated with a school bus project is going to have some buy-in and knows that things are happening ahead of time. So we understand that the utilities and school boards and parents, and there's a whole host of folks that are interested, which is awesome. But we need to make sure that the mechanics, the transportation department, the bus drivers have all been notified that there is an intent to do this. And, we hope that all the districts chat through these things with, everybody associated as well. We ultimately don't want to come into a situation where, we reach out to a potential awardee and they say, well, we haven't yet talked to transportation or, the likes of everything. So just be kind of cognizant and make sure everyone who is involved in operating the bus is aware of an intent for an application. So next slide. You still have me, Matt?
Yep, I've got you. Just on the last slide for you here. So
Cool.
yeah, it's got your contact info. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, correct. Awesome. I was just going to flip up to that slide and then just kind of a few more pieces so folks can have my email address and whatnot. If you want to bump to the next one there. So while Matt gets to that point, I would say that, ahead of the April round, if anybody has questions, please feel free, to reach out to me directly kind of during, this time. I think for a lot of folks, email or digital communication is going to be the easiest way to reach me. My email and stuff will be on the next slide. And you could reach out to Matt or any of the other folks on the webinar. They know how to get a hold of me as well. I'd be happy to work through, individual questions, anything that, interested fleets need. Don't hesitate to get in touch.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. So I'll kick off the first question, unless we have about 10 minutes here for questions. I've just got one for Chris Michalowski from Mountain Parks Electric. If you could talk a little bit about some of the electricity grid benefits of electric buses and how you plan to incorporate that into your electric school bus pilot going forward, maybe even things like vehicle to grid technology.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's definitely, as a utility, something we're interested in. From our own experience, a lot of the buses are coming built in with the capability. We're still waiting on the charging infrastructure to be, go through the listing process, but we think it's another, win-win situation to help the school, with those lifespan costs to lower it, and then also help as a, to provide system-wide benefit to the grid.
Okay, I appreciate that. And yeah, I think you mentioned that the second generation buses have a little bit more functionality than the first generation buses with that fast charger capability. So my Wi-Fi is being a little bit finicky at my house. Just the dangers of telecommuting. And I'm not seeing any more questions in my control panel, but perhaps Kirsten from Sweep, if you are seeing the questions in the chat box, would you mind unmuting yourself and asking our speakers those questions?
Sure, Matt. I've got one here from a little bit earlier. By the way, this presentation and the slides will be available via links in the next day or so. There is a question about that here. And I'm going to go down to a question from Chris Caldwell. Would children's exposure really be higher than adults if they're taking more breaths per minute, but their average lung volume is correspondingly lower? And by the way, if you were a speaker on this webinar, you are still unmuted, and just unmute yourself and go ahead and respond to the questions.
Yeah, that one's for Rick Coffin from CDPHE. Rick, do you hear the question again, or are you good?
Yeah. What was the actual question? Like, can you read that again? Sorry.
Sure. Would children's exposure really be higher than adults if they're taking more breaths per minute, but their average lung volume is correspondingly lower?
That's a good question. I think the person writing the question has a good point. But based on the health studies that I used to put this together, and the standing research, I think the medical professionals doing the research have found that the increased breaths per minute, and also the fact that children are still developing, like their lungs are still developing during that young age frame, it does make them more susceptible to develop certain things like asthma. And that's something that I can't go into further detail about. I'm an environmental planner. Obviously there's some overlap with the health side of things, but that's something I'd actually be happy to follow up with one of our health specialists, and I could send that response with a better explanation to Matt, and then Matt could send it out either to the group or to the person that asked the question.
Okay.
But good question.
I've got these questions going up in the chat box. They should be available to all presenters and to the audience. So if you guys want to take a look at the chat box and see if you see the questions, I've posted a couple so far. Are they showing up?
I'm getting some text. Yeah, this is Matt. I'm getting some text messages. I've got a question for Brad Redmond from West Fargo about whether you're using any additional heating sources on your buses so that you're not drawing power from the battery to heat the cabin. We have a couple transit agencies in Colorado that are starting to use diesel-fired heaters on the bus to maintain the electric bus range. So curious how you're dealing with that in North Dakota and plans for the future.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Our bus through Bluebird does not have any other source of heat other than the electric batteries. So when you look at, for example, the E-Line bus uses a diesel-fired Webasto heater, which again is something that's off the shelf. We use them on our diesel buses to heat. So what we're working with Bluebird on right now is a winter package for the school bus that would insulate the batteries, insulate the lines, the coolant lines, and doing a software update that would allow us to preheat the bus as it's plugged in, as it's charging. So we would be able to get all the fluids up to temperature before leaving. And that's one of the things we're testing. Here, we're kind of running out of winter now, but we're hoping that we can get this installed for next year and really test if that has an impact on our battery range, our bus range. So those are the things we're working on. I know we saw some data from a school district in Minnesota that has an E-Line bus that runs the Webasto, and the cost during your coldest months to run the Webasto heater is actually more than the electricity that it took to power the bus. And the costs of those are significantly, there's some significant costs with running the diesel powered Webasto heaters. So we're looking at it that hopefully we doing this insulation package and the software that will allow us to heat the bus while it's plugged in will have an impact on those ranges.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brad. It does appear Matt lost internet connection. He's still on via phone. Stefan, are you there and able to pick up some of the questions from the chat box? Are you there, Stefan? Okay, it looks like we might be having some continued technical difficulties. Just to let you guys know, we do have all of the questions here, and I will get those over to Matt and to the other presenters, and we'll have see what we can do about answering some of these questions. The video will be available in the next day or so, as well as the slides. One reason we're having some technical difficulties is that I spoke with GoToMeeting. I tried to talk to GoToMeeting this morning, and they are completely overloaded with activity as people start to work remotely. So my apologies for some of the technical difficulties. It's slow internet and things not performing, and some folks haven't been able to dial in, but that's what's going on, and our apologies. We'll try, hopefully this will get to be a little better process as the providers are able to meet the demand. Matt, are you still on then on the audio?
Yes, I'm on the phone. Yeah. Thanks for that recap, Kirsten. We're at the hour. So again, yeah, feel free to send over any questions either through the chat box or directly in an email to either Stefan or I, and we'll relay those and get back to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our speakers. You guys are real leaders in this space, actually buying and test driving these electric school buses. It's fantastic, and we're looking forward to getting a few of them in Colorado in 2020. So thank you all for joining, and look out for future Go EV City webinars and other transportation electrification topics coming up. All right, thanks.